Relations between Canada and China continue to crumble following last month's arrest of a Chinese executive in Vancouver and China's subsequent arrest of two Canadians working in China. Relations took another chilly turn this week when a Chinese court sentenced a Canadian man to death for smuggling drugs. Now, both Ottawa and Beijing have issued travel advisories to their citizens. The CBC's Evan Dyer joins us now with the latest. Evan, bring us up to speed on what we know so far.
Well, okay, yesterday, of course, we had the death sentence imposed on Robert Schellenberg. We saw reaction from our own Prime Minister. Since then, we've seen some reaction to that reaction from the Chinese in the person of their Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Hua Chunying, who hit back very hard at Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Let's watch a little bit of what she had to say today.
加方有关人士的言论缺乏最起码的法治精神，我们对此表示强烈的不满。我们敦促加方尊重法治。 尊重中国的司法主权，纠正错误，停止发表不负责任的言论。
So she went on to accuse the Prime Minister of malicious slander. Even I feel embarrassed for the Canadian side, she said. And you know, one interesting comment that she made right at the end of her news conference was about Canada appealing to its allies to take a position on the imprisonment of those two Canadians. She said, I've noticed that some Canadian officials have been going all out to encourage some of their allies to side with them. More of their allies, excuse me, to side with them. But these several countries cannot represent the international community. So China is clearly noticing that effort, doesn't like it, it sounds like, which some in Canada may interpret to mean that it's probably working.
Yesterday, we saw a shift in the travel advisors. What's going on there right now with the travel advisories in both Canada and in China?
Well, the actual ranking of the travel advisory hasn't moved. It's at the second of 4 levels, which is exercise a high degree of caution. There was some speculation that they might raise the level. They didn't. They simply added some more explanatory notes saying that you have to watch out for the arbitrary enforcement of local laws, pointing out that the death penalty is a threat there, that drug dealing and trafficking is dealt with very seriously. But somebody at Global Affairs pointed out to me that there is an interesting change in that what, until yesterday, the main danger in China at the top of the page was bombings and protests. Today, it's the arbitrary enforcement of laws. So, in other words, the main threat to you in China, according to the government of Canada, is no longer mobs protesting or terrorist groups planning bombs. It's the Chinese government, and that's a significant difference.
Now, a former ambassador to China that we're going to speak with in just a few moments says that executions of Canadians happened in China in recent years. Have we confirmed that?
Yes. That is apparently true. Global Affairs confirms that that is indeed true. Privacy law presumably would prevent them from identifying these individuals. But we've had confirmation of that not only from Global Affairs Canada, but also from somebody who was in the Harper government and dealt with these cases.
Okay, thank you very much, Evan Dyer, for joining us.
Thanks, Katie.
So what happened in these previous cases when at least one Canadian was executed in China? Guy Saint-Jacques served as Canada's ambassador to China from 2012 to 2016. He is now senior fellow at the University of Alberta's China Institute, and he joins me now from Montreal. Thank you very much, former ambassador, for joining us today. My first question to you is, Global Affairs has confirmed to my colleague Evan Dyer that China has executed at least one, if not two, Canadians in the recent past. And I understand that you were involved in both of those cases. So what can you tell me about what transpired?
Well, those cases involve drug smuggling. And those two Canadians, one entered China using his Canadian passport, the other one used a Chinese travel document. I should add that they were both of Chinese origin. And therefore, according to the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, we couldn't have access to the one that had used a Chinese travel document. But obviously, because of the seriousness of the case, we knew that this could lead to a death penalty. We were hoping that if it were the case that maybe they would have a reprieve, and once the sentence had been confirmed, that they would be told you spend 2 years, and if you have good behavior, your sentence will become a life sentence. Unfortunately, and this process took quite a while. Unfortunately, they were sentenced to the death penalty without being able to exercise this option. And then we embark on a process to try to ask for clemency. When the former Prime Minister Stephen Harper came to visit China in 2014, he made a plea for their clemency. The Governor General, Mr. Johnson, had done the same. Unfortunately, this was to no avail. And in fact, maybe we were only able to to do was to delay the execution by 1 year. And once the date of the execution of the gentleman who had used his Canadian passport to enter China was fixed, we informed Ottawa. Prime Minister Harper wrote a personal letter to Xi Jinping asking for clemency, and they proceeded anyway the next day with the execution.
So just so that we're clear, these are two separate cases, correct? And both of these okay, so it's two separate cases, both involving accusations of drug smuggling, and both involving Canadians with dual citizenship, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Can you tell me what you remember about each? Can you have any specific details about either of these cases that you can share? Where these individuals were from in Canada? Do they still have family here? Is there anything you can share on that front?
Yeah, well, the two cases took place in the province of Guangdong, which is in the southern part of China, the most populous province in China, a very large province. And we have many Canadians who originate from Guangdong. In fact, they still have a family. I think their family in both cases were in Vancouver. And of course, when we were allowed a last consular visit with one of the gentlemen, he asked us to pass a number of messages, in fact, a letter to his family, in which what we did. I don't recall their name, and I don't think that I would name them in any case because of privacy concern. But obviously, this was not a good moment in the relationship. We had hoped that the Chinese government would show some leniency and commute their sentence to a life sentence, but this did not happen.
What does this say about the case of Robert Schellenberg, given that China has ignored the pleas of a prime minister, a Canadian prime minister of a previous time? Should that be of great concern for the Canadian government now that China in the past has ignored pleas for clemency at the highest level?
Well, indeed, I think we have to be concerned. This case of Mr. Schellenberg, I think, clearly has some very peculiar aspects to it. One, for instance, because of how serious those drug smuggling cases are subject to in China, I would have assumed that when his trial took place, that the Chinese procurator had produced all the evidence, and therefore the 15-year sentence that he was given was appropriate in the case. I don't want to comment on whether he was guilty or not. He pretends that he was not guilty. But in any case, all this to say that the sentence of 15 years, I think, was deemed to be appropriate. Now, after that, he appealed, and then miraculously, the Chinese procurator says that he has found new evidence that requires the death penalty because it changed the role that Mr. Schellenberg played in this smuggling case. If you have looked at the details concerning the hearings that took place yesterday, it took place very rapidly. I think that there were only 68 minutes before the start of the hearing until the end when the decision was rendered. In fact, when the procurator wanted to introduce the new evidence, he was told by one of the judges, no need to talk about it, just put it in the file and it will be looked at. But a few minutes later, he rendered a sentence, a very harsh sentence, death penalty. I would add to this the fact that they had asked foreign media to attend the trial, obviously to give as much publicity as possible and to put further pressure on the Canadian government. And now Mr. Schellenberg finds himself in a situation where he has 10 days to appeal. You have heard Mrs. Freeland earlier today about this, that she asked the Chinese ambassador to show leniency and
on that, not sorry to interrupt, but on that, we have now learned at CBC News that Chrystia Freeland made that plea for clemency before the sentencing was delivered. What does that say to you?
Well, it was, when you know the Chinese system, once you know that the procurator will ask for a death sentence, you know, 99.9% of the person, once they are accused in the Chinese system, are found guilty. So the most likely outcome was that Mr. Schellenberg would be given a death sentence, and therefore Mrs. Freeland, knowing this, took the lead and met with Ambassador Liu Xiaoye to impress on him that the death penalty is not applied for such cases and asking for leniency. But I don't think this will change the attitude of the Chinese government.
We're just about to run out of time really quickly, Ambassador. The Global Times, which is a Chinese tabloid that is essentially a mouthpiece for the Chinese government, they issued a new editorial today, and I'd like to get your response to it. It said, China must continue to open up to the world, to continue to operate the way it does, even if traditional Western allies are coming to Canada's defense in this ongoing dispute. It says, opening up means not only dealing with amicable partners in business, but also engaging in fierce and even thrilling competition and games. Really quickly, former ambassador, what on earth does that mean?
Well, it means that they were not pleased by our efforts to get international support, and I would hope that the government will continue with this strategy, because we have to attract as much international attention to this. China is concerned about its reputation, and it may make them think twice. But of course, the language is very harsh, and it's typical of what I would call the new China, which is very assertive, very aggressive, and they want to take every opportunity to make us feel as the junior partner.
Former ambassador, I want to say thank you very much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And we wanted to hear from someone else who is familiar with these cases. Alberta Conservative MP Deepak O'Brien served as the Parliamentary Secretary for International Human Rights in 2014, and he joins me now from Calgary. Mr. O'Brien, what do you remember about, we are aware of at least 2 cases of Canadians found guilty of drug crimes in China that were executed. What can you tell us about these cases?
Well, one element stands out in these cases, which is different from other cases, is that these were dual nationals of China as well as of Canada. And when you have dual nationals, when they go back home, their country uses their own laws towards them and will tell us, to Canadians, that we do not have any business in interfering with their nationals. This then curtails our ability to forcefully talk about, as Christian Foreign Minister has said, and what we all do is stand up for Canadians when they are overseas, specifically when there is a death penalty. And in these 2 cases that we are talking about, both of them were dual nationals. They were seen as Chinese citizens.
Is there anything you can share about these 2 people? We don't even know if they're male or female, how old they are, whether Canada believed they were guilty or innocent. Is there any details like that you can share?
Well, due to privacy concerns, it is not possible to share those information you're asking. Suffice to say that we look at that when they go through a trial, as was in these 2 individuals through China and using, we do not accuse other countries that your judicial system does not stand international scrutiny. And in the case of China, we do that. And even currently, with the case of Mr. Schellenberg, we are talking about seeking clemency, but we do not say that your system is not per se up to international standards. Having said that, so when a person is charged overseas, they have to go through the local system. And then our intervention is based on that by providing services, that humanitarian services, and make clemency pleas as we have done now.
Can you walk us through what happened when the Harper government tried to stop the execution of those 2 Canadians?
Well, as the former ambassador said, the ambassador is our point on the ground, and so whatever we will do will be going through the ambassador. And in this case here, the ambassador has articulated how he processed, where Prime Minister Harper sent a letter, and when he met with the leader, he raised the issues, which is a normal standard protocol that we have to do in consular cases when Canadians are overseas, are facing difficulties.
Looking back, is there anything that your government should have done differently?
Oh no, you cannot. And we tell this every time to every Canadian when they go. First, remember carefully, you have to follow the laws of the country in which you are. And number 2, if you're a dual national, understand our inability to strongly speak for you, because those countries will say you are their nationals.
Okay, on that point somewhat, and just as this case clearly right now is if someone is found guilty in China of drug smuggling, clearly the consequences are very severe. But with these two other cases that we believe happened in 2014, 2015, if this happened so long ago, why are we just learning about this now? Would it not have been valuable to Canadians or dual nationals to hear about this in the hopes of preventing any other, whether the behavior was justified or not? But is there any way to have a preventative moment here or have at least some more awareness?
The department always puts out these points when you're traveling overseas. When I was the PS for Consular Affairs, we made this very clear to Canadians that you have to follow the rules of the country where you are. In particular instance, in these two cases that we are talking about, as I said, they were seen as Chinese national. They went through the process, and the Chinese probably media who did not allow Canadian media to come through there. The fact of the matter is, due to privacy concerns, the department is not going to highlight that. We are not going to talk about it because of the privacy concerns.
But should it still be discussed, because it is, of course, this is the life of it's a dual citizen, but it's the life of a Canadian. Should it not have been made public?
Well, the process was done. Prime Minister Harper intervened. The ambassador intervened. We talked about it within the government. But there was the problem again arises from the fact that, as the Chinese said, they're nationals.
What should the Liberal government be doing in the Schellenberg case? What would your best advice to them be?
Well, they've done the first step, which is the right step, to ask for clemency, and then from there on, we should make sure that there is an open dialogue taking place. There is through our ambassador, so the channel of communications are open, always open between our two, because through these communication channels, we'll be able to diffuse this situation.
How does, when the Canadian government tries to get clemency in a case like this, how do decisions like that weigh on you personally as a politician? You were aware of the case. Prime Minister Stephen Harper tried to personally intervene. When you're unsuccessful in this, how does it weigh on you?
We become a little bit dismayed. We become a little bit sad. We feel try to learn from the process to say, what better way we can do to improve the process, and how to intervene, and how to it is a sad state, because if somebody has been killed, the family suffer. But in the department, we try to see what we can do best so that we can see how else we can improve.
And really quickly, Mr. O'Brien, were there any lessons learned that stand out to you that might be useful to the current government that you guys went through in these two cases?
Well, in this current government that we are going through, one big difference is that this gentleman is a Canadian only, not a dual national. Therefore, there are protocols, international protocols, Geneva Protocol, to say consular access and all those things. But I think at the end of the day, the most important route that should be open is that the channel of communication must be open between the two governments, and through that channel, communication can carry on and appeals made, and whatever we can do to ensure the right of the Canadian.
Conservative MP Deepak O'Brien, thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Thank you very much.